Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Mike Anderson. My guest this week is big game biologist Brett Weedman. Brett oversees the bighorn sheep population here in North Dakota. Brett, give us a little background on bighorn sheep in North Dakota.
Well, they were native to the state, of course, and were extirpated by about 1905. And then the department reintroduced bighorn sheep in 1956. So we've had bighorns in the state for about the last 60 years.
Okay, what's the population currently?
Currently we're at about 300 total. As you know, there was a well-publicized pneumonia event that began in 2014. At that time, we're at record numbers, about 350, but right now we've declined to about 300.
Explain what a bacteria pneumonia is.
Basically, we had some deadly pathogens introduced to our population in 2014. And basically what happens is it affects the respiratory system of bighorn sheep, causes pneumonia, and you can have varying degrees of mortalities of adults. It wasn't catastrophic in North Dakota. We probably lost about 15 to 20% of our adults. And then it began in 2014, and it spread, and then the last herds were affected actually in 2016. So it took 2 years to spread through our entire population. So those pathogens are now in every herd in the state. The main thing that occurs is over the long term, it typically results in lower lamb recruitment rates. So prior to that, we were at 50-60% lamb recruitment, which is phenomenal for bighorn sheep. And now in 2016 and 2017, we had our two lowest rates on record. So basically what happens is when the pathogens are introduced, the adults will be affected. The adults typically then will recover for the most part, but then they will pass on these pathogens to lambs. Of course, lambs do not have the ability really to fight off these infections. So what you'll see is when you get into late summer, these lambs will develop pneumonia and typically not survive their first year of life. So we're probably going to see effects of this, for the long term. But again, it has been catastrophic. We're still at 300, and we still are producing lambs. So it's not all bad news.
Brett, you just finished your summer population surveys on bighorn sheep. How are things looking?
Well, how we do our population survey is we go out in summer, and then we'll count and classify all rams, ewes, and then lambs. So when we do the summer survey, lambs are about 3 months old. So what we found is, and from the summer count, that's when we determine the number of hunting licenses. And rams have declined quite a bit since the last couple of years by design. So what we did after the die-off, we closed the season in 2015, and then we reopened it in 2016. And then what we wanted to do is we had a lot of mature rams in the state that survived the die-off, and we thought, let's allow hunters to harvest these rams instead of them dying of pneumonia. So we were pretty liberal with hunting licenses in 2016, 2017. So our ram count a couple years ago was 104, and this year we counted 77. So it's down about 30%. So we went from 8 licenses to 5 last year in 2017, and now this year we issued 3. So then the completion of the survey will occur in March. We go out and then we recount lambs. So the good news is we counted 47 lambs during the summer portion of the survey. That's a pretty high count. The caveat is that about more than half of them were coughing, showing signs of pneumonia. So what we do is we'll go out in March and recount those lambs to determine how many will be recruited into the population and survive their first winter. So our adult survival now is pretty high. It's 90-95%. So there's no reason to be overly liberal with harvest. So even though our ram count was down, that's okay. We'll back off on licenses. The ewe count was actually up from last year. We counted more females, which is good. And like I said, our lamb count was pretty good. We'll just have to see how many of those survive their first winter.
Sure. Moving forward, any changes to the management of bighorn sheep?
No, there's really not much you can do. Once these pathogens are in your population, there are no vaccines, there's no treatment, there's really nothing you can do. A lot of the bigger states, if it gets bad enough, they'll just go in and depopulate their entire population and then reintroduce healthy animals into those areas. Unlike CWD, which can stay in the soil and it really lingers in the environment. These bacteria that cause pneumonia in bighorn sheep, it's called Mycoplasma ovinemoniae, that's the fancy name, but they can't live outside the host. So once you depopulating area of Bighorn, the deadly pathogens are gone. So we'll just have to see, and there is some evidence now that bighorns can build immunities to certain strains of mycoplasma. We'll just have to see. It seems like our adults are doing pretty well. And again, like I said, we are getting some lamb survival. And a lot of states dealing with these disease events right now, they're getting 0 lamb survival. And that's when you're in trouble, because you're not getting any ingress of new animals in your population. Right. So we are still recruiting some lambs.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Are we able, with bacteria pneumonia in the bighorn sheep population, are we able to bring animals in like we have in the past?
Right. So our last bighorns we brought in were from Montana in 06 and 07, and they just did extremely well in North Dakota. I mean, just our rapid population, rapid recruitment rates, very high recruitment rates of lambs. Unfortunately, no, because you can't introduce animals at this point now, because all you're going to do is they're going to be exposed to those pathogens, and you're going to take perfectly healthy animals, expose them to disease, and then the cycle just continues. So we're kind of, I want to say, stuck with what we have, so we're going to have to just see how our population does. Unit B1, which is south of the interstate, we're at very low numbers now. So that's been closed the last couple of years, and there'll be no hunting again. I think we counted 8 or 9 rams total. So our southern population is at a point now where it's so low that we'll just have to see where we're going to go with it, if at some point we depopulate and start over or what. But up north of the interstate, they're doing much better.
Okay, so basically we're going year to year on whether we have a season or not.
Exactly, yeah. So what we do is in years past, we would have our application process in March. We determine licenses at that time, and then we kind of project what we'd want for licenses for bighorns. Now with disease in the population, what we do is people apply on the big 3 application, bighorn, elk, and moose, and then they just apply for a tag. And then we'll complete the population survey around the 1st of September. And at that time, we'll determine the number of licenses, what units, and then we run the lottery, and then we contact those winning applicants directly.
A lot of good information, Brett. Thank you.
You bet.
For more information on bighorn sheep season, or any hunting seasons in North Dakota, go to the Game and Fish website at gf.nd.gov. For big game biologist Brett Weidman and the rest of the staff here at the Game and Fish Department, thanks for joining us for this week's Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.